Namaskaram. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to chapter 13 of our beautiful journey, Svadharma, the key to joyful living. Today, we do not have Swati and Anurag who are driving back to Surat, so we will not be doing the meditation today. Over to you, Ram, to start the proceedings.
All right. First of all, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Let us hope the blessings of Krishna to be with us in whatever we do. You know, I'd like to start today's exercise with I'd like to start today's lecture with a small exercise. I'd like you to, when we are talking in terms of joyousness, which is what Krishna's message from chapters 7 to 12 was all about. Okay. When he was talking about joyousness and how you can actually bring a state of joyousness into your life. What I'd like you to do is today, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to think about that one person who's helped you in your life. Your mother, your father, your spouse, your guru, your teacher. And I want you to think about this person and I want you to thank this person for what they've done to you. Yes, if you can just close your eyes and think of this one person. It could be, as I said, somebody who has helped you in your life and helped you reach to where you've reached right now. So if you can just kind of close your eyes, recall that person and thank that person, for whatever he or she has done and helped you in your life. Recall the wonderful things that this person has done. I'd like you now to recall somebody who's alive and do the same exercise. Maybe your child, maybe your spouse, for all the good things that they've done to you in your life. And here is a request to all of you. Can you send this person that you thought of, either if the first person is still alive, great, or the second person, as I said, somebody who's alive, can you send this person a message today saying, I truly am grateful to you for what you've done to me in my life? Okay? Can you send this person a message of gratitude saying, I'm really grateful to you for what you've taught me, for what you've learned, and don't stop it at one. If you have a great guru, then send it to that guru. If somebody has taught you some wise lessons in life, send it to this person and say that, look, I'm very grateful to you for what you have helped me in my life. Okay, because gratitude is a very, very important emotion, and gratitude kind of frees up a lot that is there in us. So before we begin today's journey, I'd also like to recognize and wish a very special person a very happy birthday. So Srini, can you play the song? And then after that, I'll tell you whose birthday it is today.
जन्मदिनमिदं ऐ प्रिया सखे जन्मदिनमिदं ऐ प्रिया सखे शन्तनोतु ते सर्वदा मुदं शन्तनोतु ते सर्वदा मुदं प्रार्थयामहे भवशतायुषी प्रार्थयामहे भवशतायुषी ईश्वरः सदा त्वां च रक्षतु ईश्वरः सदा त्वां च रक्षतु पुण्यकर्मणा कीर्तिमर्जया पुण्यकर्मणा कीर्तिमर्जया जीवनं तव भवतु सार्थकम् जीवनं तव भवतु सार्थकम् जन्मदिनमिदम् अयि प्रिया सखे जन्मदिनमिदम् अयि प्रिया सखे शन्तनोतु ते सर्वदा मुदं शन्तनोतु ते सर्वदा मुदम्
Thank you very much, Srini, for that. This is a message that goes out to Babji, our good friend. May this birthday, Babji, bring you auspiciousness, happiness, a lot of what you want, Babji. May God bless you. And Shamla, may all great things happen to you, Babji. Yeah, this is a. So all of us, Babji, here today are going to wish you and say that, on this Janmadinam of yours, may all the good things happen to you. Wonderful. So, ladies and gentlemen, we begin our discovery today. And anybody else in this room who's celebrating their birthday, the same greetings and the same wishes to you. If it's your birthday or it's your anniversary, this is for all of you. Well, so let me begin today with chapter 7. As I said, let's invoke the blessings of Sri Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Krishna, please be with us. Help us in this journey of understanding your message. So, if you recall, from 7 to 12 was all about the divinity within, about the Lord, about the manifestations of the Lord, about the manifestations of the divinity within us. From this chapter 13 to 18 is a lot about how can you actually adopt a method by which you can attain a certain liberation. What is this whole business of liberation, this whole moksha that we talk about? This is this liberation from all the all the things that hold us back in our life. How can you get liberated from that? That is one part of it. Of course, how can you get liberated from this endless cycle of birth and death? And how can you move on to another plane? That is another interpretation of this liberation. So from now onwards, the entire tack completely changes. And so we get into this whole area. Now, this is again, as we keep moving on, as you would have seen, for instance, in the earlier chapters, or almost up to chapter 9, there is just one concept that Krishna talks about. But from this chapter onwards, what he actually does is that he packs in a huge punch into the entire message of the Gita. So it's no longer a singular focus. So there are 3 or 4 things that he talks about in this particular chapter. So the first thing that he talks about is that, how do you distinguish between the body and the higher self? He talks about what is wisdom, okay? What is the supreme Brahman? And how can we actually integrate all of this? So it's quite a power-packed chapter. So let's pick up the threads and play the first. So I must tell you that some of the commentaries of the Gita don't have this first verse that we are playing right now because they don't recognize. I mean, some of them don't recognize it, but it's important. We've included it because this gives us a certain context to what Krishna is telling us. So in some of the books, you will see this marked as verse 0, which means that this is not numbered. It's not part of the 700 verses. So like that, there are quite a few verses across. So this is to help us understand the context of this entire chapter. And it is not part of the 700 verses. So there are about 4 or 5 such verses across the Gita just to help us understand. So Srini, shall we pick up verse number 1 according to us?
अर्जुन उवाच प्रकृतिं पुरुषं चैव क्षेत्रं क्षेत्रज्ञमेव च एतद्वेदितुमिच्छामि ज्ञानं ज्ञेयं च केशव.
So Arjuna picks up this. Sorry, Srini, will you help us, Srini? Go ahead, Srini.
अर्जुन ने कहा, हे केशव, मैं प्रकृति और पुरुष, क्षेत्र और क्षेत्रज्ञ तथा ज्ञान और ज्ञेय का जानना चाहता हूँ.
So Arjuna, so this is the context setting for this whole chapter in many ways. So he says, look, I want to understand what is kshetra, which is, I want to understand what is prakriti, what is this purush, what is, all these concepts that you've explained to me. Can you please explain to me now? What is the distinction between the kshetram and the kshetrajna? Okay. What is kshetra is obviously the body, and the kshetrajna is the person who, the inner self, and the person who knows the inner self. So will you please explain this whole concept to me, Krishna? I need to understand this now and continue with my entire journey. So as you can see, it is a different Arjuna that is asking these questions now. This is the spirit of inquiry saying, how do I now move beyond what I've got? So Krishna answers him, Srini, verse 2. Actually, verse 1 in the Gita, in this chapter, but yeah.
अथ त्रयोदशोऽध्यायः श्रीभगवानुवाच इदं शरीरं कौन्तेय क्षेत्रमित्यभिधीयते एतद्यो वेत्ति तं प्राहुः क्षेत्रज्ञ इति तद्विदः.
श्री भगवान ने कहा, हे कौन्तेय,
Yeah, Srini.
श्री भगवान ने कहा, हे कौन्तेय, यह शरीर क्षेत्र कहा जाता है और इसको जो जानता है उसे ज्ञानी लोग क्षेत्रज्ञ कहते हैं.
All right. So just hold this slide as it is, Srini. So what Krishna is telling Arjuna is very simple. He says that, look, this body, this outer manifestation is the kshetra, the field in which all the activities take place. And the person who knows this is the knower, is the kshetrajna. So in many ways, what he is trying to tell us is this, that look, the inner self that resides within the body and the person who understands this difference between the outer manifestations and the inner person is the person who becomes the kshetrajna, the knowledgeable person. So where is it to be found? Okay, how do we know where this kshetra is and where is it to be found? So Krishna goes on to explain to him in verse number 3 and 4, saying that, look, this distinction between the kshetra and the kshetrajna, the person who, the outer body and the inner body, and the fact that the person who knows and understands the inner body, this has been described at great length by so many different kinds of sages. It has been described by people who know what they're talking about. So this is a knowledge that is available to you. But what I will do is that I will now explain to you, Arjuna, what is kshetra, what is wisdom, what is the Brahman, and what is the interplay between all of this. And I'm going to try and explain this to you, Arjuna. So have some patience and listen to what I'm going to try and tell you. Okay? Yes, Srini, let's pick up in verse number 5 and verse number 6.
ऋषिभिर्बहुधा गीतम् छन्दोभिर्विविधैः पृथक् ब्रह्मसूत्रपदैश्चैव हेतुमद्भिर्विनिश्चितैः.
You can play even 6, Srini.
महाभूतान्यहङ्कारः बुद्धिरव्यक्तमेव च इन्द्रियाणि दशैकञ्च पञ्चचेन्द्रियगोचराः.
क्षेत्रज्ञ के विषय में ऋषियों द्वारा विभिन्न और विविध छंदों में बहुत प्रकार से गाया गया है तथा सम्यक प्रकार से निश्चित किए हुए युक्ति युक्त ब्रह्म सूत्र के पदों द्वारा अर्थात ब्रह्म के सूचक शब्दों द्वारा भी वैसा ही कहा गया है। मूल प्रकृति, बुद्धि, समष्टि अहंकार, पंच तत्व, 10 इंद्रियों और इनके 5 ज्ञान इंद्रियों के विषयों में विचारने वाले एक मन है।
Okay. So he is now talking about the way the body manifests itself, you know, the way, the manifestations of the kshetra. And he reveals to us that there are 31 different types of manifestations of the body. And therefore, it's important for us to understand what these 31 are, because it is these 31 that go to creating the outer self that expresses ourselves. So whenever the body, whenever our outer self expresses itself and interacts with the rest of the world, it is the interplay of these 31. So what is he saying? He says it's the 5 elements. And if you recall, we did this a little earlier. He talks about space, he talks about air, he talks about fire, he talks about water, and he talks about earth. These 5 elements are what come into contact with the body. The second he says about the ego that comes again into contact with the outer world, the intellect, buddhi. And then he says the unmanifest, which is the, which is the imperishable nature which is there, prakriti. Okay. Then he talks about the 10 plus 1 senses that we've got, the sense organs that we have, which is the 2 eyes, the nose, the nostrils, the mouth, the ears, the skin, okay, and the all of these things. Then he talks about the mind that again gets involved with the outer world, and then he talks about the 5 objects of the senses. So how do these sense organs interact with the 5 objects of the senses is what he talks about. He says the sense of smell, the sense of touch, the sense of feel, the sense of hearing, the sense of seeing. Okay, all of these are again what come into play when we are talking in terms of the objects of the senses. And then finally he says all of the stuff that we actually experience, the mind experiences, which is desire or repulsion or happiness, misery, the body, intelligence, patience, consistency, all these 31 are the different manifestations that the body experiences when it comes into the outer world. So this is the first thing that he tells us, that look, this is the kshetra. This is what we need to be aware of. The fact that these 31 different aspects will interact with the rest of the world. Okay? It is these 31 aspects of the body that are constantly in the interplay with Prakriti, which is nature. And this is the definition of the kshetra, because this is what Arjuna's supposed question was. That he says that, look, so the first 6 verses really lay the foundation for us to appreciate the distinction between the body and the soul. Sometimes we get confused as to where does the body start and where does the soul start. We will get into that in a moment right now. But this is the body. So these 31 different aspects constitute the body that are at any point of time in touch with the outer world. Okay? And then, of course, he takes us into a very, very beautiful path when he talks about what is this wisdom or what is this true knowledge. Because he said this is kshetra. Now, how do you understand what is the kshetra jana? What is the kshetra, that the knowledge and the wisdom that you need to identify? And this is again something which is amazing. He talks about the 20 different attributes here. So if you see, what he is trying to do to all of us is this, that he is trying to make it extremely simple for us in terms of our understanding of what this whole thing is all about. What is the wisdom? So he lays down the qualities that now are going to enable wisdom. And I'd like you to hear this carefully, and then we'll understand and analyze each of them.
Chadvesha sukham dukkham sanghataschetana dhrutihi etat क्षेत्रं समासेन सविकारमुदाहृतम्
इच्छा, द्वेष, सुख, दुख, संघात, चेतना अर्थात प्राण शक्ति और धृति, इन विकारों के समावेश के साथ यह पहलू संक्षिप्त रूप में बताया गया है.
Right? So this is what he continued, that 5, 6, 7, this is what he is trying to tell us, that look, all of these put together, which is desire, aversion, happiness, misery, the body, consciousness, all of these are the ones that get involved and they manifest in the outer world. Yeah, Shri, if you can go to verse number 8, which is the point about the wisdom part. I think we've compressed all of this, so Srini, you may need to play this all at one time. Go ahead.
अमानित्वमदम्भित्वम् अहिंसा क्षान्तिरार्जवम् आचार्योपासनं शौचम् धैर्यमात्मविनिग्रहः इन्द्रियार्थेषु वैराग्यम् अनहङ्कार एव च जन्म मृत्युजरा व्याधि दुःखदोषानुदर्शनम् असक्तिरनभिष्वङ्गः पुत्रदारगृहादिषु नित्यं च समचित्तत्वम् इष्टानिष्टोपपत्तिषु मयि चानन्ययोगेन भक्तिरव्यभिचारिणी विविक्तदेशसेवित्वम् अरतेर्जनसंसदि ध्यात्मज्ञाननित्यत्वम् तत्त्वज्ञानार्थदर्शनम् एतज्ज्ञानमिति प्रोक्तम् अज्ञानं यदतोऽन्यथा.
We have a translation for this, Shrini, anywhere? Go to the next one. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
मान्य होने, दिखावे और हिंसा जैसे सोच को हटाकर सहनशीलता और सरलता को अपनाकर आचार्यों के पास बैठकर स्वच्छ होकर और अपने को अनुशासित करके मन को स्थिर करके इंद्रिय विषयों से ललक और अहंकार को हटाकर जन्म बुढ़ापे मृत्यु के दुख कारक दोषों को सूक्ष्मता से देखते हुए अपेक्षाओं को हटाकर पुत्र, पत्नी व घर में रहने वाले अन्य सभी को स्वतंत्र अंग मानते हुए मन भावन मिलने पर चित्त में लगातार संभाव बनाए हुए भीड़ भाड़ से परे एकांत में स्थित होकर न भटकने वाले भक्ति भाव से मुझ में एकाग्रत से जुड़कर तत्व ज्ञान से पहचानने के लिए नियमित अपने आप का अध्ययन कर. ऐसे अभ्यास से होने वाला ही ज्ञान है, बाकी तो सब अज्ञान ही कहा गया है.
Fantastic, Shrini. So we can move on from the slide. So see what he's telling us now. Okay, he says these are the 20 qualities that enable wisdom. Okay, he talks about the 20 qualities that enable wisdom. And the interesting thing is that the first thing that he starts off with is humility. He says that, look, you cannot get anything without him. If you don't have humility as part of your system, then you can't get anywhere in life. The day we become arrogant, the day we decide that we know everything in life, then that's the day our journey ends. And he starts with humility. And then he goes on to explain modesty. He says you must be modest in what you do. And if you recall our entire definition of Svadharma, of causing harm to no one, making sure that in this journey of yours you don't cause any harm to anybody. Then he talks of patience, that you must wait for things to happen. Don't be impatient. He talks of being upright, because it is that uprightness, that standing up for what you think is the right thing to do. He talks of worship of the Guru, which means being grateful to those people who've helped you, and that is the exercise that we did this morning. That trying to express our grateful to people who helped us in our life. And please do that today. Send them a text message after this program is over. saying that, I'm truly, truly grateful to, 1, 2, 3, 4, as many people as possible who have helped you in your journey called life. Acknowledge the fact that there are people who are out there who are helping you on a daily basis. Then he talks about purity. He talks about consistency. He talks about self-control. And he says all of this, whether, to be in a person, like if you recall, we said that, look, there will be an obstacle that will come in your way, but how are you going to handle that is more important than the obstacle itself. Will you have that self-control to do that? Then he says no attachment at all for any of those sense objects. If you recall, we talked about the sense objects a little earlier. The smell, taste, hearing, feel, touch, etc. Being completely, not attached to those things. A complete absence of ego. That don't let your ego cloud what you can actually have. Seeing the limitations of birth, death, old age, sickness, pain. Don't get worried about that. That is bound to happen to all of us. We will progress from being from a child to becoming old, and that is something that will happen. And then he says no attachment or identification with anything which gives you a feeling of mine. And his example here is very simple, saying whether it is a son, whether it is a wife, whether it is a home, don't get too attached to these things. Because when you get attached to these things, then you're setting yourself up for disappointment later in life. Don't get too attached to that. It is normal for us to get attached, but he says don't. Because if you do, then you are setting yourself up for some amount of disappointment that can happen a little later in your life. Okay? Then he says, being in a state of equanimity, whether good or evil comes to you. And then he talks about a constant devotion to the Supreme Lord. If you recall chapter number 12, when he says that completely be devoted to me and I will help you in what you want to do. And then he talks about practicing solitude, which is an aversion for society, which means trying to make sure that you create that me time for yourself. And then he says, or being constantly preoccupied with others' affairs. And that's a very important thing. If you look at your mind space today, a lot of that mind space is occupied because of being involved in too many issues which don't really concern you and your Svadharma. And each time you get involved with all those kinds of activities, you're moving away from your path of your Svadharma. You're moving away from what you need to be achieving in your life. So he's telling us that, look, have it, even if he goes on to say, of course, he says having an aversion to society, but actually what he is trying to tell us from today's context is this: don't get too involved in others' affairs. Okay? In Kannada, there is a beautiful statement that says, Parachinta namagyakaya, which means, why should I get involved with others' chintas? Parachinta is, why should I get involved with other people's chinta? I have enough of my own. Okay? And then he talks about something where he says, go to quiet places, visit holy places, meaning go to places where you can sit down and contemplate, where you can create that space, whether it is a temple in your house, whether it is that room, whether it is that garden that you can sit, whether it's the sea that you can sit and stare at. Go ahead and do that. And then he talks about this, that, being completely devoted to spiritual wisdom, and more importantly, having that perception of aiming for truth. And therefore, his whole thing starts with humility as a very important character. If you recall, even in the last one, when he was talking about, he started with humility. So this is a very, very important lesson for all of us, saying that here are the 20 enablers of thought. So if you see each of these, what is it all about? At the end of the day, if you can integrate this into your thinking, then obviously the thoughts that will come out of you will enable action, significant action, and will help you move to your Svadharma. So if you are humble, if you have no attachment, if you have no sense of ego, if you have no sense of I, then obviously the kind of actions that you will take will be important to you and to the whole world. But the minute you start clouding those thoughts with all other extraneous reasons, then you're obviously not going to be able to take that action. You're not going to be able to pursue that particular action. So he says this 20 enabling thought kindlers, let's call them, This is what will help you get onto your Svadharma, and this is your path to wisdom. So he's talked about the kshetra, the 31 different attributes, and then he's talked about these 20 different enablers, thought kindlers. And he says, look, can you make this a part of your entire life? He then moves on and he says that, look, now let me explain to you what is that inner self, that higher Brahman that you talked about. So first, be aware of the body. And then from there, get into this area where you know that what are the kind of thought kindlers, thought enablers that you need to practice. What is the wisdom that you need? And then he moves on from verse 12 to 17, where he talks to us and tells us about the different ways in which you can recognize the higher Brahman. Srini, I think we've got slide number, verse number 12. Can we play that, please?
It's verse 17.
Oh, verse 17. Sorry, go ahead, please. Sorry.
अविभक्तं च भूतेषु विभक्तमिव च स्थितं भूतभर्तृ च तज्ज्ञेयं ग्रसिष्णु प्रभविष्णु च।
वे परमात्मा स्वयं विभाग रहित होते हुए भी संपूर्ण प्राणियों में विभक्त की तरह स्थित हैं। वे जानने योग्य परमात्मा ही संपूर्ण प्राणियों को उत्पन्न करने वाले, उनका भरण पोषण करने वाले और संहार करने वाले हैं।
So, so when he starts off from verse 12, this is what he's trying to tell us. He says, look, the 6 verses from 12 to 18 is all about the inner self, about the Brahman. Because he says that people who know that inner self are the kshetrajna. Okay, so what does he tell us? He tells us, he starts off by saying that, look, Arjuna, I am now going to tell you something which will help you achieve immortality. That supreme Brahman that is within you, who's without a beginning, who's without an end, who's beyond all our beings. And then he says that, look, he resides everywhere. He is all encompassing. He has his hands, he has his feet, he has everywhere. He has his ears. He is literally everywhere. This higher self, this higher Brahman with you. It manifests in the functioning of the sense organs, but it is not the sense organs itself. So you can experience this inner self, you can experience this higher self, this Brahman, without any attribute, but it protects all the attributes. And he goes on to say that, look, it is outside, it is inside of all beings moving and unmoving. It's very subtle, almost difficult to comprehend. It's so near and yet so far. And he goes on to explain to us that, look, it is undivided, but it appears to be divided. And it is the sustainer of all human beings. It is this higher Brahman, this self, this incredible higher self. He goes on to say that, look, it is the light of all lights. It is beyond darkness. It is wisdom. And it is the wisdom that needs to be known. That is really that is the highest Brahman. Okay. So this is what he's trying to tell us. He says that, look, this is the kind of person, this is the higher self. So use those enabling thoughts to understand this higher self, this higher Brahman that is there. That this Brahman is everywhere. It is all over you. It is with you in everything that you're trying to do. It is this higher self. And that is his call to all of us. Saying that, look, when you're looking at this Brahman, can you start looking at it from a different way? And then he explains to us, yes, Srini, verse number 18.
अविभक्तं च भूतेषु विभक्तमिव च स्थितं भूतभर्तृ च तज्ज्ञेयं ग्रसिष्णु प्रभविष्णु च।
Shrini?
से अंधकार से परे सब प्रकाशों का प्रकाश कहा गया है। वही ज्ञान है, जानने योग्य है और सारे ज्ञान का अंतिम पड़ाव भी है। वो सभी के हृदय में विराजमान है।
Right? So see what he see what he is trying to tell us. Okay, that when you look at this particular verse, it's very interesting. Okay, he says that look, this is that knowledge that you need to understand, and these are the three aspects that will make you the kshetrajna. What are those three aspects? Number one, to know the outer body, okay, the outer manifestation of the body, which is what we saw in verse 5 and 6. And then the constituents of wisdom, which we looked at, which is verse 7 to 11. And finally, the knowledge of the Brahman, which is from verse 12 to 17. And he says the person who knows this will understand one very important point, okay, that he is the source of light, he is knowledge, he is the object of knowledge, and he is the goal of knowledge. Yeah, Srini?
इति क्षेत्रं तथा ज्ञानं ज्ञेयं चोक्तं समासतः मद्भक्त एतद्विज्ञाय मद्भावायोपपद्यते.
So, yeah, Srini, sorry, go ahead.
इस प्रकार क्षेत्र, ज्ञान और ज्ञेय को संक्षेप से कहा गया। मेरे भक्त इसको तत्व से जानकर मेरे भाव को प्राप्त हो जाता है।
To hold this slide, okay? So this is what he is trying to explain to us, saying that, look, I have now explained to you the nature of the field, which is the body, the meaning of knowledge, which is the wisdom that I talked to you about in 7 to 11. And finally, what is the object of the knowledge, which is the Supreme Brahman. So now that you understood the interplay of all these three things, you can start working on your higher purpose and getting to what you want to get to in your life. And this is his message to us. So we have now figured this out, that look, there is this field, the kshetra. We figured out what is that knowledge and wisdom that will help us move above the body and into the area, into the realm of the Brahman. And how this particular Brahman who resides in our hearts, how do we actually get to understand that particular aspect of the Brahman, right? Yashini, can we go on?
य एवं वेत्ति पुरुषं प्रकृतिं च गुणैः सह सर्वथा वर्तमानोऽपि न स भूयोऽभिजायते.
जो इस प्रकार से पुरुष और प्रकृति के गुणों सहित पहचानता है, वो सदैव वर्तमान में रहता हुआ फिर से जन्म नहीं लेता।
Okay, I think there's one more coming after this, Shani. Can you just check that?
ज्ञानेनात्मनि पश्यन्ति केचिदात्मानमात्मना अन्ये साङ्ख्येन योगेन कर्मयोगेन चापरे.
So can we just go back to the earlier slide? Right. So what he does from verse 18 to 24 is this. He is now explaining to us, saying that, look, now that we've understood the field, we've understood that knowledge and wisdom, and then we've understood the Brahman, we now need to understand what is Prakriti and Purusha. Okay? Who is Prakriti and who is Purusha? What is nature and what is the Supreme Soul, Purusha? Okay? How do we understand this and how do we understand these? So there are 5 verses from 19 to 24 that actually explain this to us. The first thing that he says is this, that Prakriti and Purusha are beginless and they will change according to the gunas that are born from Prakriti or nature. And then he goes on to explain that, look, it is Prakriti that is responsible. It is nature that is responsible for the interplay of the cause and effect, the senses and the body. So it is these gunas which are born out of the Prakriti. It is these gunas that make sure that the senses and the body start interacting. That is the cause and the effect. Whereas the Purusha within, the higher self within, is very, very important because that person doesn't get involved in this entire interplay. And it is that Purusha within which either will cause to happiness. So the Purusha who resides in Prakriti experiences the gunas born out of nature, but is not attached to this at all. And it is this that causes a rebirth in a good or a bad womb. And then he goes on to explain this to us, saying that somebody who understands this supreme truth, he is the person who will understand very well. So we then in verse 25, okay, he goes on to explain how do we recognize this inner self? How do you recognize this supreme soul? And he tells us there are 5 ways that you can do it. There are 5 ways to recognize the supreme soul within your heart. Okay, and that's the important part. If you remember, we kept talking, saying there is this supreme soul that resides within your heart. This is within you. And how do you do that? One, you can do it through meditation. You can sit down and quietly meditate, like what Swati has been doing every day, or what I've been asking you to do, me time, expressing your gratitude. All of this is a form of meditation. So prayer, meditation, all of this is something that will help you understand the supreme soul, the higher self within that resides in your heart. The second thing he says is by patience, by the path of wisdom. If you can get onto that path of wisdom and work on that by the cultivation of knowledge, as he says here, if you get onto that path of wisdom, then definitely you'll be able to achieve that. The third, he says, is that look, try and do this by the path of yoga, which is by the path of action. Okay? And he talks about this entire Ashtanga yoga way of achieving what you want to achieve. And finally, he says by the path of action. If you recall, these are the 5 ways. And finally, he says, if you can't practice any of these, which is meditation, the path of wisdom or knowledge, the path of yoga, or the path of action, then do me one favor. Do all this to me. Do this in a spirit of devotion to the spirit, to the higher self. Do this with a certain amount of bhakti. Do this with a certain amount of worship on what you want to achieve. Because if you're able to do that, then you're able to get to what you want to get to. So these are the 5 ways that we can practice realizing this inner self, which is there within our hearts. And he's clearly specified these 5 ways. Then he goes on to explain that the fact that, the pursuit of wisdom and knowledge, okay, will now, how do you actually pursue that? And what are you going to be doing about this is what forms the rest of this particular chapter. He talks to something very interesting. He says when the kshetra and the kshetragna, when they interact, that is when the birth of all beings moving and unmoving happens. And it is important for us to see that it is this interplay of Prakriti and the gunas and the Purusha that we need to keep in mind. So he is making a very fine point here for all of us. Okay? Recognize that there is a body. Recognize that there is this wisdom which will help you to get those enabling thoughts. Recognize that there is this higher self within you, within your heart. And more importantly, remember one thing. The interplay, all this happens because of nature. And that nature, he tells us, is because of the 3 gunas that are there, the sattva, the rajas, and the tamas. While we will explore this in greater detail in the next chapter, and there's a lot for us to learn from that, here is something that I want you to understand. That if you recall, in one of the chapters, we went through this exercise and said, what is this interplay of the gunas that are basis in nature? In some of us, that is the ability to think. In some of us, it is the ability to continue to be creative and do. And in some of us, it is the ability to actually go out and serve what we want to do. Now, the fact is that these 3 gunas are there in every human being. And during the day, whenever you're going to get into multiple transactions, you will be accessing one of these 3 types when you're going to be dealing with people. And it is these three things that will lead to whatever are the manifestations of what you're going to be doing. So he very clearly tells us that, look, when you realize that supreme being in you, that is when you start becoming a man of knowledge, and that is when you become a man of wisdom. So Shrini, can we look at that particular verse now, please?
यावत् सञ्जायते किञ्चित् सत्त्वं स्थावरजङ्गमम् क्षेत्रक्षेत्रज्ञसंयोगात् तद्विद्धि भरतर्षभ।
हे भरतवंशियों में श्रेष्ठ अर्जुन, स्थावर अर्थात पेड़ पौधे और जंगम अर्थात प्राणी का पैदा होने तय क्षेत्र और क्षेत्रज्ञ से ही मान।
Okay, so what he is trying to tell us in this particular verse is this, that look, whatever you see, okay, whatever you see, whether you're seeing it, whether whatever you see as moving or not unmoving, remember this very important point, okay, that whatever you see that is moving or not moving, keep this in mind, okay, that this results from the union, okay, this results from the activities that are happening. So whenever the kshetra and the kshetrajna, are going to interact, you will then find that you're going to get the activities that you want. So when you start realizing that there is this supreme being in you, then obviously you're going to make sure that this supreme being that is there within you is going to, you can't injure it, you can't do anything about it, and that will help you achieve the goal that you want to achieve in your life. And therefore, it is important for us to understand that this inner self which is there within us, it is this inner self that is the non-doer. So we talked about this whole concept of it being a non-doer. It is the outer body that actually interacts with the objects of the senses and with the nature and with Prakriti. So don't get worried about it. If you do this, then you are going to be realizing the ultimate truth in your life. And when that is the time when you start achieving a state of the Brahman, that is the time when you achieve a state of being one with the Supreme Soul, or being one with your higher purpose in life, or being one with your own higher self. So can you start working on that? The fact that there is this supreme higher self that resides within all of us, can we start actualizing it? And this is the way that he teaches us that this is something that we can do. And then he says something very interesting. He says that, look, just like the pervading ether that is everywhere, yet does not get felt, the supreme inner being that is there, the supreme Brahman that is there, this divinity that is there, this God that is there, is everywhere. Don't try and get into a situation of trying to figure out where this divine being is and how does this divine being work. So I think, the important thing is this, that I think we need to get into a situation. So his message to Arjuna and to us through that is this: start accepting that there is this supreme divinity. Start accepting that there is this higher Brahman within you. Start accepting that there is this higher self within you. Now, if you are comfortable pegging it outside, go ahead, do it. But if you don't want to do that and you want to actually do it within, then do it. That is also perfectly all right. Yeah, Srini, the next stanza.
यथा प्रकाशयत्येकः कृत्स्नं लोकमिमं रविः क्षेत्रं क्षेत्रे तथा कृत्स्नं प्रकाशयति भारत।
हे अर्जुन, जैसा एक ही सूर्य संपूर्ण संसार को प्रकाशित करता है, ऐसा ही एक ही आत्मा संपूर्ण क्षेत्र को प्रकाशित करती है.
So look at the beauty of this statement. That this divinity that is there within each one of us, this ultimate Brahman that is there within each one of us, this Brahman is something that, like the sun, who illuminates the. So you have the capability to take your higher self and transform it, transport it into a much, much, much higher level in life. That is something that is available to you. That is something that you're capable of. And therefore, when you're doing this whole thing, keep this in mind. Don't play small. Make sure that you don't play small. There is this immense amount of greatness that is waiting to be tapped. And don't allow yourself to play small in life. That is his biggest message to all of us here. That you have so much, you are like the sun. I mean, you can illuminate everything that you want. And that individual soul that is there within you, your inner self, can illuminate your entire consciousness. And through that, you can start illuminating everything that you do in this world. That is the ability that is there within us. So when we are working on our Svadharma, on the higher purpose of our life, and we want it to get there, there is no doubt in Krishna's mind, and that is what he's telling Arjuna and through Arjuna to all of us, that look, this is something that you can achieve in your life. In this lifetime, it is possible for you to achieve everything that you want to achieve. And then he ends this particular chapter. I don't think we have that particular slide, Srini. I think this is the end of the presentation.
Yeah, this is the last one.
So he understands. He tells in the end of this chapter, he says that look, those who understand this fact that there is this body and there is this supreme inner self within you, and those who understand that are the people who will be able to figure out how to handle Prakriti or nature. And once you do that, then that is the kind of freedom that you want. That is the kind of liberation that you want from this entire business of existence and going through this business of existence. So understand these three things very carefully. That there is your body, there is Prakriti or nature, there is this knowledge and wisdom that you want, there is this higher soul that you have, this higher inner self that is there, this higher divinity that is there, this Paramatman that is there within us and which is outside. If you can understand these, then you're able to come out of that interplay of the gunas and firmly start moving on the path of what you want to achieve. So this chapter in many ways talks about how can we achieve our inner supreme self. The fact that we need to rise above the trappings of our body and its interplay. That we need to get out of this ego state. We need to come out of this feeling that I am the doer. And we need to recognize that, look, within us lies this immense supreme soul, this immense divinity that is there within each of us. And also one very important point, that not only does it lie within me, but it lies within you. With every person that we are going to interact, there is this immense divinity that lies within that person. Some of us are fortunate that we are recognizing it today. Maybe the people that you're interacting with have still not recognized that aspect of your life. Maybe they will take some time. Recognize that also and accept that. That not everybody can be at the same point of this journey like you are. That's perfectly all right. And then he goes on that I am now laying out a roadmap for you on how you can use this wisdom and how you can start appreciating this higher inner self within you. Because that was Arjuna's question, if you recall. He started off by saying, tell me, O Krishna, what is this body and what is the knower of the Supreme Self, the Kshetrajna? How do I know what I can do with that? Okay, so to very quickly recap, he takes us through 3 or 4 very interesting concepts. The first, he talks about the body, and if you recall the 31 different ways in which the body interacts with nature, with Prakriti. And then he talks about the 20 different attributes, which are thought kindlers, which are thought enablers that help you move on your higher Svadharma, on purpose of your life. And then he talks about the Brahman, of how do you actually recognize the Brahman. He talks of Prakriti. And most importantly, he talks about those 5 ways that you can adopt to achieve your Svadharma. Okay? He says that, look, and ultimately he ends it all by saying that one of the best ways to do it is to have this blind faith or this devotion or this bhakti to your own inner self, your capabilities. Have that faith in yourself, because if you do, then you can start moving forward on what you want to achieve in your life. If you want to, as we keep saying, if you want to peg it outside, great, but then have that faith, develop that faith, because that is that faith that is going to get you to what you want to do. So it's a very interesting way that he has described this entire thing to us, saying these are the various ways in which you can actually figure out how to do it. So you can meditate on what your purpose is, fine. You can start going on the path of acquiring wisdom and knowledge, that is fantastic, you can do that. Or you can look at it through the path of yoga, through the path of action, and finally, develop that faith, that bhakti, and worship that divinity within you. This is the way that you will start attaining that liberation that you want from getting trapped in the mundane existence of the interplay of your body and the sense objects. With that, we conclude this particular chapter. And Om Tat Sat, open to any questions, any thoughts. Just one clarification. Some of the numbering of those verses got a little, it may go a little up and down, because as I said, verse number 1 that we put actually is verse 0. So in some of the books, 33 may be referring to 34. So don't get worried about that. We will correct it when we send those slides across to all of you. Okay? Om Tat Sat. Open to any observations, any questions, any thoughts, please.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself and now speak.
Should I start?
Please, go ahead, Ashutosh, please. Yes, you should.
Yeah. First of all, my happy birthday to Babji and all those who are enjoying birthday today or any other occasion. Sheshu, I express my gratitude to you, Srini, and Anurag for initiating this thing. And today's chapter is a bit difficult, but you have explained so very well that a lot of things. I have read Gita a couple of times, but a lot of things which was not clear in my mind. So that has been very nicely clarified. I have noted down in my way, so that I can now just rethink about it and try to arrive at some conclusion about understanding this chapter. So thank you very much. My gratitude to all of you, and you really made it very simple for me to understand. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is I mean, in many ways, this is that 70 mm cinema scope chapter, though it's a small chapter, but it's the sweep of the. So now he's testing us. So in some ways, I say that from now onwards, he's testing. Have you guys paid attention to the first 12 or not? If you've not paid attention to the first 12, my friends, go back and go back into a revision class and come back, because from now onwards, I'm going to test you. I'm not going to, till now, I kind of, the first 6, I kind of spoon fed you. In the next 6, I, tried to give you a beautiful thali. Now I'm saying, well, here's the buffet, my friends. Go pick it up. It's all out there. I mean, he's now going to test us. And all of this, from now onwards, it's going to be testing, especially from a Svadharma perspective. If you when we interpret this from a divinity perspective, from a godhood perspective, then it becomes very easy because you say, look, just leave everything, leave it to him, like that. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
So, as we talk about Purush and Prakriti, can I equate this to the concept of Ardhanarishwar, where we have that each person is made up of both Purush and Prakriti, Prakriti being the outer or the very nature, and Purush being the inner self or the Atma? I mean, can I equate it that way? Ardhanarishwar?
Very interesting. I haven't thought about it, but it's a fantastic interpretation. I think it's a great interpretation that you come out with. That yes, why not? I mean, it's the yes, that is one interpretation. I have heard of another very interesting interpretation, which is if you heard of the Chinese yin and yang. That you have this aspect and that aspect too within you. But this Ardhanarishwar, I think, is a very interesting concept that can be researched and you can actually do it. Yeah, why not, ma'am? Yeah, absolutely.
Ram, can I say something on this?
Please go ahead, Swati.
So the concept of Ardhanarishwar is the balancing of the masculine and feminine polarity. So each one of us has both the polarities. For a woman, the feminine polarity is the benefits polarity and the masculine polarity is on the inside. And for a man, the masculine polarity is the manifest and the feminine polarity is on the inside. So when these two polarities are in perfect alignment, then the concept of Ardhanarishwar comes in. The yin and the yang. One is the masculine and one is the feminine. And the two together make us whole and complete.
Yes. Yes, sir. Any other observations? Any other thoughts? Any other?
Yeah, Ram, can I ask a question?
Please.
When you start feeling that there is a supreme being in you,
Yes.
so you can start getting a little arrogant also, no?
Yes.
I mean, you start feeling, मैं ही तो supreme हो गया हूँ.
Yes. Very true.
How do you handle that?
Which is why, if you recall, he starts off by saying that the first thing that you need to cultivate is humility. Okay? And this humility lesson he teaches us not, he's taught this earlier, he's taught this now, and he goes back actually in 14 or 15 when he describes all the different qualities. He goes back to humility again. And that is his repeated assertion through saying that you must practice humility. So the point, Renu, is that the day you give up that quality, humility, that is the day then you can expect a sure shot, clouding of your ignorance, your mind being covered, and then slowly but surely you descend into nothingness. That's the problem.
But you can forget that you are not being, humble at all times. And I mean, you can just forget, like if you are amongst 10, 12 people and you start shedding your knowledge and you feel, okay, I know everything. That's also not the right thing.
100%. That's what I said, no, that when you take a particular action, I mean, just to simplify this whole thing, if you take an action, there will be an outcome. Okay? There will be 100% outcome for any action. Now, as if you recall, we said a series of outcomes is a result. Every outcome that you do, there are certain manifestations of this outcome. If you allow those manifestations, and that's what he talks about, I mean, when he talks about those 31 things, when he says desire, repulsion, happiness, misery, intelligence, patience, consistency, all these are manifestations. of those outcomes. When he talks about the 31 different thought enablers, okay, he says these are the manifestations is what he is talking about. Now, if you can get carried away by those manifestations, then yes, then you will start believing that I'm the doer, and then therefore that is the surest way that you're going to have a downfall. Unfortunately, I think what also happens is that somehow I think this is our conditioning. We want to label everything that we see or hear or touch or feel or see. We want to label everything. It's the bestest in the world. And that's when those manifestations start taking over your life. Or this is the worst experience of my life. Okay? And when we start putting those labels onto these experiences or those manifestations, that's, I think, where the problem starts. And I'll tell you the worst, another thing that is very dangerous, if I am somebody who is so involved in the manifestations of my outcome, the world recognizes this and then consciously keeps pushing me into those manifestations. And slowly but surely I become, I allow my ego to blind me and then not permit me to move in that particular direction. That's the challenge. That's the danger that we all have.
Ram, can I say something?
Please, Reshma, go ahead.
First and foremost, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for giving us this beautiful divine mornings from the last 12 days. Thank you to you, to Anurag, to Jayesh Bhai, to Rajiv Senior, Srini, and all the members of this group. It's been very enriching, very fulfilling, very satisfying, and very divine, blissful mornings for the last 12 days. Thank you so, so, so very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reshma. Any other observations, any other thoughts, any other thing that you'd like to share?
I have a query and your ideas on this, that taking off from where Renuka ji said that about, as you move forward, there is a possibility of, you becoming arrogant or, something like that. Can we say that the rituals defined in the Hindu system is a way of constantly reminding us that, there is a higher thing and we are all answerable to somebody and that we get our power from somebody. So basically, why are the rituals there? And is it to let us know that we are not the supreme, if it's my question, it's not properly phrased, but
No, I think it's an interesting question, Pankaj. If you look at all the, if you go back into thought, Vedas capture a lot of ways you need to perform a certain set of rituals. If you go back into the Vedic rituals, which fortunately has been kind of forgotten over the period of time, what are those rituals all about? Those rituals are to propitiate nature. So you're praying for rain, or you're praying to Mother Earth, or you're actually doing those prayers to nature, saying that, please help me, and this is what I want, or this is what I'm doing it, or whatever it is. Because the Upanishads are a lot of stories. And the Bhagavad Gita, which is the third in the triad, is about the way of life. Okay, so these are the three very important scriptures that we have. Now, those rites and rituals that we perform all have a meaning. Every one of them has a very deep meaning. Okay, a very deep meaning that is there. So why do you offer ghee? When you're doing a havan or whatever it is, why do you offer ghee? Why can't you put kerosene? After all, if you want the fire to go up, you can even put kerosene. No, what's wrong? put petrol, I mean, put any other, put oil, no, put ordinary oil, put coconut oil, put any oil that you feel like. Why should you want to put something like ghee? There is a whole meaning to that whole thing. You know, when you take milk and then you set it, it becomes curds, and then when you churn the curds, and then you get butter, and then when you clarify that butter, it becomes ghee. So in many ways, it is teaching us this lesson, saying that, look, you've got to go through this process of transformation. So when you're offering ghee, you're saying that, look, I am offering a certain transformation of myself into you. No? Isn't it? It's gone through so many transformation processes before it has arrived here. So in many ways, when I'm offering this, I am saying I want to get transformed myself. Okay? So there's a meaning into every one of those things. Okay? Why should you do it early in the morning? Why should you do it late at night? Even if you take all the rituals that some of us are seeing, for instance, the wedding rituals, there is a deep meaning in each of them. You know, when you do the Saptapadi, when you get the boy and the girl to move those 7 steps, there's a huge meaning to that. Now we've made it into Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, and it's nice and it's a lot of fun. It's good. I mean, I have no quarrel with all of that. But somewhere what has happened is that we've forgotten the meaning behind that. So you're right. What happens when you perform this, but you perform it with your heart? And then you hopefully get the person who's helping you perform that to explain why you're doing what you're doing. You know, even when you do that entire havan or you do that sacrifice, there is that fire that is coming up. What does it mean? It means that, I want this higher inner self of mine to keep rising. Okay? So why can't you do that without the fire? Then, where is this allowing your inner self to go up? And why are you offering all the stuff that you offer there? In a way, you're saying, okay, all these are my ego attachments. And so in that havan, you're supposed to put a piece of gold, you're supposed to put a piece of precious stone, you're supposed to put a piece of silk, why do you do all of that? It's saying, look, this is the things that I'm attached to in my life. I'm just giving it up. So, here, so it's a very deep meaning, Pankaj. It's not just, but then you can also outsource it now, no?
Sankalp.
But then, yeah, I mean, I have no quarrel with that. But
Yeah,
then
sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, yes, when you explain it like this, I understand the feeling that I have experienced after any kind of a puja or a havan. It's a very humbling experience. Yes. When you get up from there, you feel that, that thing. That's all.
Even when you offer a flower, he says, if you recall, he said, give me water, you give me a leaf, you give me a flower, you give me whatever you want, right? It's not just throwing the flower, but if you can touch it to your heart and say, this is coming from my heart. Okay? This may not be the best flower on earth. This may not be the most expensive orchid that has been flown down from Singapore or wherever. This is not a tulip that has come from Amsterdam, right? This is just something that has grown in the wild in my house, and I've just bought this flower and I'm offering it from my heart. It becomes a completely different meaning. So when you do that, even that swaha, that is the whole purpose of that is to say, this is coming from my heart. I'm offering it from my heart here. Therefore, this is what I'm capable of right now. And therefore, please accept what I'm offering it, because I'm giving it to you with a certain amount of divinity. That's when that whole experience is a life-transforming experience. Sometimes when you go to a holy place, you go to Tirupati, or you go to Mahalakshmi temple, or you go to Siddhivinayak temple in Bombay, you come out feeling different. Because that is the day when you've taken your heart and you've said, what I'm giving you. That's what he means in this chapter, saying, do whatever you do with devotion, do it with bhakti. Because ultimately, when you go through that moving experience, the Pankaj, what are you doing? You're uplifting yourself. That is the whole purpose. Right. Any other thoughts? Any other observations? Any other?
There was a question from Drin in chat, though he left, but the question is interesting.
What is it?
It says, why should one attain immortality?
Why should one attain immortality? Oh, very nice. I think this whole question of immortality is not so much from a birth and death perspective, Shini. Okay, my understanding of the Bhagavad Gita is this, that I don't think it is very clearly right up front. He says, look, guys, I mean, you're going to die. Yeah. So he's very, very clear in his mind that says, the day you're born, you're going to die. I mean, death is completely written. I think that he clarifies right up front in chapter 2 itself that all beings are going to perish one day. So nobody is going to be immortal in life. Nobody. But can we attain a certain immortality of our thoughts? Can we attain a certain immortality of our deeds? Okay? Can we attain a certain immortality from the outcomes of our actions? Can we do that? Now, we've gone across the country and we built schools as members of the Roundtable. Every day there are hundreds of young children who are coming to that schools. And every day they are getting a nice place to sit and read. Okay? Now, there is a certain immortality in the smiles of those children that are coming. They're looking forward to come to school. Okay? I was involved with this project right from the time that we joined Roundtable in 1987. I remember building our first school, I think somewhere in 1988 or 1989 in Secunderabad. And instantaneously, this place that we went and built the school, we built this, I think, somewhere in old Hyderabad or whatever, I forget now, is that there was a lady who came and told me that, my son is now getting up early in the morning, looking forward to going to your school. Now just imagine, we are talking of 1988 or 1989. Today we're talking of 30, 31 years later. That boy must be what, 35, 36 now. Okay. There is a certain immortality in the action that we've taken and the outcome of that. So I think that is why we need, so can we strive towards that? Okay. Even now we are, we talk so much about the wonderful work that people are doing. That I think is the immortality that we look at. I don't think we should look at immortality from the fact that, I will live for the next 400 years or 500 years or 600 years or 800 years. I doubt very much, even if I do, it will be a very lonely life.
And tell me what are you managing the food now?
Yeah, Rajiv?
The question is such that, see, every human being would always want to sit down and attain immortality, get the so-called moksha that we talk about and we hear about, In the process of doing that and knowing, this path of the Gita, what is the right way of living and the right way of doing things, what happens is that it gives rise to a lot of fear in individuals' minds, So rather than, something becoming very open, like for example, that if I know that this is the right thing to do and I will attain moksha after this, then I always have that fear in my mind that if I do something wrong, I will not attain moksha. So in doing that, with the rise of that fear that keeps coming, because too much of knowledge also, helps to give rise to these fears, because if I did not have this information, I would not fear it. So what happens is many times individuals, don't live their lives the way they would want to live it, but live it according to the so-called rituals, so-called societal norms, so-called, things that are there. So how does one overcome those fears? Because it is not practically
that's
possible
exactly.
for a human to, or for any of us individuals here, to do everything right.
I think, Rajiv, the point is very, I think that is the whole purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. He tells very clearly, don't live life according to somebody else's ideals of perfection. You lead your life according to your ideals of perfection, number one. Okay? Number two, he is very clear in his message saying, don't do things according to your Svadharma. Do things in a way that is going to make you happy and spread happiness in the world. Don't worry about the hereafter. Don't worry about what will happen. And the most important thing that he says, do whatever you do with a spirit of bhakti and devotion. That's it. Okay, so don't do it with a spirit of fear, saying that, look, I'm doing this because this is what is expected of me. Then you are going against the Bhagavad Gita. If you are going to be living your life on the basis of what somebody else is telling you is the right thing or the wrong thing to do, then you're not following the principles of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, number one. Number two, this whole concept of moksha is what? At the end of the day, no, Rajiv, you attain moksha when you go to sleep. Isn't it? In a slightly morbid way, there is no guarantee that you're going to get up tomorrow morning, right? No guarantee. Okay? But when you're going to sleep tonight, when you put your pillow on the bed, when you put your head on the pillow, Rajiv, can you have a sound, nice sleep? That's moksha. When you eat something great today, whatever you eat, can you digest it? That is moksha. Right? Have a great conversation with somebody and you learn something, that person learns something, you share something, that person shares something. That's moksha. So let's not get into this concept of moksha saying, boss, there is an afterlife and, yeah, there is an afterlife. Nobody knows this. Nobody doesn't know this. Okay. So let's not get into this whole, business that I am now trying to ensure my next janam. Let's not get into that. The whole point is very simple. Yeah. If you are going to sit in meditation right now, Rajiv, and if you're going to do some meditation, at the end of that experience, are you feeling happy? Okay. If you're doing, I know that you are a great follower of Mata Rani, and you have you have that part at home every year, right? You do that. Now you do it for your own satisfaction. I was fortunate. I was there once in Bombay with my program. And the divine experience that all of us went through, that's moksha, no? I'm sure there must have been 3 or 4 people who had attended that didn't feel that way. Fair enough. But those of us who did that to me, no, Rajiv, my concept of moksha and immortality is this, yeah. That can I look into your eyes and wish you? And there is a genuine, happy feeling of love that we both can exchange. That moment to me is moksha. So whatever we do, let's do it that way. Let's not, what happens later, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, is there something like that? But one more thing, let me tell you. Somebody called me yesterday or day before yesterday and gave me a very interesting point. He says, look, let me also tell you one thing. Whatever you sow today, you will reap this year. Whatever you sow this year in the land, you will reap it the same year. You're not going to reap it 10 years from now. Okay? So likewise, if there is something that you are doing to spread unhappiness, that unhappiness will come chasing you in life. What form? We don't know. Whether it is in the form of ill health, whether it is in the form of ill fortune, whether it is in the form of not having a great family relationship, something will happen somewhere. Okay? But to me, moksha is not in the hereafter. To me, moksha is now. I mean, here. So can I start practicing my life in such a way that we get that? Okay, like we all got together and we sang happy birthday to Babji today. He didn't expect that. I'm sure he's feeling good about it, no? So that moment to him is moksha. You know? And when we did it with so much of love, to us, it's a feeling of, let's keep it to that, no, Raji. Let's not worry. Let's not take it into fear and, what will happen to me. I keep telling this, no? Just imagine the halat of that poor guy up there, yeah. Okay? Let's just talk about India. Let's not even talk of the world. वो 140 करोड़ लोग को मतलब कीपिंग ट्रैक ऑफ कौन क्या कर रहा है, राजीव मेहरा ने आज अभी क्या किया, आशुतोष शुक्ला ने कल क्या किया, पंकज सिंह ने परसों क्या किया. Can you imagine what that giant supercomputer that poor chap should have up there? And to say, हाँ ठीक है, ये राम शिशु ने ऐसा किया, चलो उसको भेजते हैं. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, endorse it totally, because I think everybody may feel the same, but most of us, our most beautiful year has been when we were chairman of our roundtable club. We have achieved a lot in terms of personal goals and also happiness. I think people can relate with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Wonderful. Any other question, any other thought, any other observation, any other share? So tomorrow is another very interesting session. If you can read the chapter, do and come back. Chapter number 14. He has still now just been literally teasing us about gunas and what is guna and how does these gunas work and what's it all about. But tomorrow's chapter is fantastic when he actually explains the meaning of sattva, raja, and tama. What is the meaning of being a person of sattva guna, or what is the meaning of being a person of rajas guna, what is the meaning of being a person of tamas guna, and how these gunas and their interplay come into force. So tomorrow is going to be a very, very, very interesting chapter. So read it up. It's not again a very big chapter. It's a manageable chapter, but do read it so that we can spend some time tomorrow. Right? So with your permission, wishing Babji a happy birthday again, Babji. Have a great day and great year ahead.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you, all my friends. This is a great way to start the day, and all your blessings and wishes are with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Invoke Krishna's blessings to be with you.